Batchelor. I'm a second year MAMST student here at Karma, and my creation for you today is called the Contrenot. The Contrenot is essentially a digital musical interface I built designed to sort of mimic some of the mechanics that a classical bass player would use on a traditional upright bass. So I'm a bass player myself, classically trained, and I wanted to bring some of those musical affordances to the instrument. I guess so there are really three components that make up this entire thing. The first of which you see kind of hidden here with some gaffer's tape. So there are actually two sensors here. There's a 500 millimeter linear pot for position, as well as a FSR, force sensitive resistor strip underneath that. So they're layered together, and together they provide both position, like if you would on a fingerboard, and aftertouch. So this is a special, there's under the hood of this, there's actually it's feeding through a high resolution ADC, and I'm able to get really precise movement. And the reason for that is really just to get this sort of vibrato sound. So these are painstakingly hand calibrated to get all the pitches that I want here. Below here, I also have this pull string interface, as I just kind of alluded to here. So this one has a little more handiwork done. Under here, I have, what I've done here is I've gutted a tape measure, and I've gotten the flat coil spring from it, as well as sort of the spool that holds the spring, the back of the tape measure. And I've 3D printed some custom components here to translate the rotation. What I've done here is I've 3D printed this spool, the spool here to translate the rotation data into this rotary encoder. So this is a 200 pulse per rotation rotary encoder that actually measures the rotation and sends little clicks, it's really a square wave, but which we can turn into ticks. And we can measure the general ticks, are there ticks or not, the general density, to get sort of a gate, node on and off. But we can also are able to measure the distance in between these ticks to get how much time has elapsed. And we can do that to get velocity. So as a result, this bow is not only a gate, but also can be mapped to like velocity and timbral settings to get some expression. So as I move slower, smaller movements, it's softer. And as I move here, it gets a little bit louder. And I actually can have some articulation as well for things like tremolo. So it's pretty responsive, and it works quite well. All of this, of course, is just going into an Arduino, and we're converting the information into a serial message. And the serial message is going on my computer. And right now we're running a Sporth patch. So my Sporth patch is doing further processing of the data, kind of massaging the data here, rescaling it and mapping it to be more musical, and it's producing the sound. And that's really all it is. And so right now I have a patch on here called the Martenot patch. So you'll note that the name Contrenot actually comes from the Martenot, which is this very old, very beautiful French instrument, the Ondes Martenot. And my name is really kind of a mix of contrabass and Martenot to make the Contrenot. And one of the big influences of this instrument is that this is also inspired by the Gametrak controllers, as seen by the SLORK orchestra. This is the Stanford Laptop Orchestra here. They have these pull string interfaces, as well as sort of general ribbon controller based interfaces for kind of fretless control. So the one that comes to mind for me is the Omatone. It's the Japanese instrument with the little squeaky thing, and it's very similar to this sort of fretboard. So these were I was cognizant of these while designing this instrument. As well as just kind of my general bass musicianship that I've cultivated over the years. So that kind of went into the feel. I spent a lot of time making sure this felt right, and that I was like, this felt right, and just picking the right springs and stuff. Like I said before, this is the Martenot patch, so I'll just play a little bit here, just so you can get a sound of what the expression is like. So like I said, there's a lot of sound with this patch, but pretty much this is just a dummy interface. It's just pretty much a very smart mouse, and because of that, we can actually map this to several sounds. So I had a lot of my colleagues tell me, well, it's a contrabass. It should sound like a bass, and I said, you're absolutely right. So I actually have a few bass patches here. So the one I show you, I've been calling this the Rockstar patch. And I think in a moment you'll see why. So, oh, there it goes. So there we go. Rockstar patch. It's a little sensitive at times. I got some other, I'm going to go through some other patches here, if that's all right. I've got a variation of that patch, a little more tame, but I've got one more bass patch in that category, so we can't have a bass without having a classic Hoover sound, a supersaw Reese. So here's my interpretation of that. So as I was building these patches, I had enough time to build enough patches, and I started playing around, because since this is just an interface, I'm not bound by any physical sounds, so I started building some more experimental patches. So I want to explain a little bit more of these in depth. So right here, this is sort of playing around with the sensitivity of the FSR patch, and really choosing this as kind of a launcher for instruments, so kind of using hammer-ons. And this is sort of inspired by a Hawaiian slide guitar, believe it or not. So I want to put my finger down here, and you'll hear, it'll trigger some sounds instead of playing continuous sound. Meanwhile, the bow here is going to control really feedback. There's a hidden long reverb that here and feedback delay that I can trigger on and off this gate at the bow. So I'll play a couple seconds of that so you get the idea. Great. So going along with more of these, I've got here's some other leads I have. So playing around more with the FSR and pressure, I have a really simple square patch inspired by Commodore 64 lead sounds. So this is a square lead I made. It's just a square wave generated from Faust actually, but it's got the FSR, the pressure, the aftertouch, which is actually extended. You don't have aftertouch on any string instruments. So I have the FSR playing with that mapping here and mapping it onto pulse width of the square. So as it turns out, playing around, having a raw square wave modulating the pulse width kind of takes us back to the late mid-80s, early 90s, the Commodore 64 SID chip. where this sort of lead was very popular, pulse wave lead. So this is really where this lead sound comes from. So a square wave lead. So let's go back into some more interesting territory. I think I probably see if I have any other sounds here. Oh, good. So let's go to our arpeggiation instrument. So this was something I was thinking about really early on. The idea of we're limited here. We're very one here. We have one strip. We have one bow. There's a one-to-one mapping. And I was really trying to think about the ways that I could actually expand upon that and have polyphony and control orchestras, because like I said, we're not here to recreate instruments of the past, we're here to explore instruments of the future. So here's a little test patch I made. It's an arpeggiator that I'll play a little bit. So every time I put my finger on here, it knows when I do it, and it actually kicks on a clock. So every time I put my finger down in bow, it'll actually turn on a sequence clock. So I can hold my finger down and play a cycle of fifths, and that's actually, you can kind of hear that it actually saves a lot of trouble. I don't have to move my fingers around as much. So I hope you enjoy this. Stuff stuck here. Gaffer's tape doesn't do all the jobs here. So I'll just mention, now that it's on my mind, you'll notice that I was kind of grounded here, and I didn't really I was kind of impeded by this instrument. At the moment, the way I built it, it's very fragile, and there's no real great way to put it down and set it aside. And I had several very stressful moments where this actually fell over quite a few times. So I think in hindsight, I'd probably think about, its resting state, but that wasn't really something I thought about at first. So things you learn. So I was just the arpeggiator patch. Along the same lines, I thought, okay, what if we could control multiple notes and have like a moving chord? Something like that pluck patch we heard a little while back that sounded kind of like a funky Hawaiian guitar. So this patch really is just playing two notes. It's playing fifths. And I chose fifths because those are pretty, those are the nicest intervals you can do and the easiest ones you can do without sounding too crazy. So you can actually get creative and slide up and down, and it'll just sound like two notes in fifths. You can also play notes in intervals and do some interesting polychords. So I'll try to play this a little bit. So this one I call waves. Great. You'll probably notice that my intonation is not great on this instrument yet, and it takes a little bit of practice, even for a bass player used to a bass neck. And the reason for that is, and what I forgot to mention is that I've divided this up into 24 equal musical steps, 24 semitones, and as it turns out, that's not how string instruments are mapped. They follow more of a logarithmic mapping. So for me, it's been, I forgot to mark the frets. They were overwritten when I spray painted this black, and so it's difficult to, I've been doing it by feel at this point. So with a little more practice, I probably can nail the intonation, or if I built some sort of snapping algorithm, there's no reason why I can't just snap these to the notes. But for now, I want it to be fretless, because that's really what I'm here for, to get this kind of mapping. So, inspired by that impediment, I thought, well, you know, we don't even have to play real tonal sounds. I mean, it's just, we don't have to associate this with a fingerboard at all, really. We can just use this for other means of expression and enjoy non-periodic sounds. So, I was kind of inspired by some of the sounds I heard in the Arrivals trailer that is coming out this December, I think. And it had some very interesting sound design. And I too enjoy making creature sounds, so I built a little patch in Sporth that based on this. So this will be my final patch, so I'll leave you with these sounds to think about and ruminate on. So thank you for listening. Here's Aliens. Oh, I should talk about this patch a little bit, actually, before I start. So, once again, I'm playing around with the FSR. You'll hear a clicking sort of sound that's happening. And I can control the speed of the clicking simply by pressing down on the FSR here. I have a relative frequency being mapped here, but since I'm using such an envelope on it, it actually doesn't sound like a pitch. It sounds more like a timbre. And I have this guy just controlling the gate, essentially, and a little bit of loudness. There's a little bit of velocity in there. So let me play a little bit of this. That's a fun one to play. I like it because I don't have to think about the intonation at all, so that's a fun one. So that's about all the sounds I have for you, so thank you for watching.